Hi all, my name is Frida Martin and I've created this presentation to advocate for the importance of pandemic prevention. Amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, pandemic preparation has received a great deal of attention. It has become clear that many countries and regions were not as prepared for a highly communicable illness as expected. However, another topic of great importance that has been underrepresented during this time is pandemic prevention. Although better preparedness could have alleviated the force with which COVID-19 struck many of the regions of the world, an arguably more potent strategy for minimizing the effects of such an event could have been a more robust prevention plan, potentially shutting down viral transmission early and averting the crisis altogether. Because literature defining the differences between pandemic preparedness and prevention is limited, I want to start by more clearly distinguishing between the two. These distinctions are open for adaptation by the WHO as is seen fit. Pandemic preparedness focuses on readying a region for the pandemic to affect them. This can include measures such as determining methods of reducing transmission within the region, coping strategies to keep the economy strong while the pandemic is underway, and generally bolstering the ability of that area to come out of the pandemic as unharmed as possible. Pandemic prevention has a different focus, emphasizing discouraging a contagion capable of causing a pandemic from appearing, reducing the likelihood of zoonotic events, which are often the catalysts for pandemics, from occurring, and aggressively and robustly clamping down on the transmission of novel infections as soon as they are detected in both human and other animal populations. With all this in mind, it is clear that pandemic prevention is in direct relation to Sustainable Development Goals 3, 6, and also 13 due to climate change's effect on cross-species interactions. It is worth noting that the two overlap in some ways, particularly in that both approaches to a pandemic encourage the reduction of contagion transmission. Pandemic preparedness is certainly an important concept. It is no question as to whether another pandemic will occur eventually, even with stronger prevention measures in place. However, good pandemic prevention strategies have the potential to stop a given illness outbreak from ever reaching pandemic proportions, and in turn, prevention has the power to protect the health of the global population and avert a great deal of damage from ever happening. In a sense, pandemic preparedness can be viewed as the strategies to employ after the first line of defense, which is pandemic prevention, has been breached. Even if pandemic prevention fails, a robust early response with a preventative focus has the ability to buy time for the rest of the world to set up their pandemic preparedness strategies. A similar scenario played out when reports of a novel coronavirus first began to stream out of China as it locked down to try containing the transmission of COVID-19. The attempted pandemic prevention was ultimately not a success, but China's decision to shut down and limit transmission bought weeks of time for the rest of the world to prepare themselves for the virus. The story of China's early pandemic response is both an example of the utility of pandemic prevention and an example of how it is currently being under-attended to. On the one hand, aggressive measures to control the spread of COVID-19 were employed and generated a great deal of extra time for the rest of the world to prepare. On the other hand, however, multiple sources claim that the first response from authorities in Wuhan was not to clamp down on the spread of the virus, but on the spread of information. This choice to act like nothing was wrong simply allowed things to get worse in short order. Furthermore, it is still unclear as to where the virus originated from, but the consensus seems to be that it was not in humans. Therefore, a zoonotic event must have occurred and gone undetected. In other words, there are three distinct points identified where pandemic prevention measures were inadequate. First, a zoonotic event occurred. Second, this zoonotic event went undetected. And third, initial detection of a novel contagion was not met with countermeasures to prevent further transmission. Now, if anyone knows how to fight a pandemic, it is the World Health Organization. So why am I advocating pandemic prevention to the WHO? To start, as mentioned earlier, the distinction between pandemic preparedness and pandemic prevention has thus far been unclear. Using them interchangeably would not come as a surprise, and because of this, any pandemic prevention measures made are simply made as part of pandemic preparedness. However, this is a problem because pandemic prevention and preparedness are two separate interacting subjects, not a single subject. Commingling the two has made it harder for pandemic prevention in particular to get the attention it needs and deserves as a method to severely mitigate the effects of a novel disease outbreak, and this effect has not been escaped even by the WHO. The second reason I'm bringing this advocacy to the WHO is that pandemic prevention is currently being insufficiently attended to. This can be seen in the previously discussed example of how the COVID-19 outbreak was initially handled, as well as the fact that it even got to the point of becoming an outbreak, and all can see the long-lasting effects of these failures to prevent. Advocacy for this topic is necessary because pandemic prevention measures are currently inadequate. The final reason that the World Health Organization is the best audience for this presentation is that they are uniquely equipped to handle pandemic prevention scenarios. The WHO, a subsidiary of United Nations, is not only one of the only public health organizations present globally, it is also the most influential global health organization. Pandemics are a global health threat, and they can start anywhere. Therefore, there is no better organization to advocate this to than the WHO, because there is no better organization to make improvements in this sector of public health. Pandemic prevention is all about methods of stopping pandemics from happening, and strategies to bolster pandemic prevention are focused on current situations that increase the risk of pandemic scenarios. One issue noted by Childs is that most of our responses to zoonotic diseases occur post-spillover, meaning that we react to the zoonotic event occurring rather than reacting to the threat of a zoonotic event. To change this narrative, I suggest discouraging interactions between humans and animals that could be carrying unknown illnesses, as well as limiting interactions between domesticated and wild animals. Taking these two steps alone will limit the ability for influenza viruses to jump from birds to humans, birds to pigs, and pigs to humans, as well as limiting the ability for a whole host of viruses to jump from bats to humans, including through an intermediary reservoir. Another step to treating zoonotic events proactively is to help limit the spread of diseases among non-human populations. As a disease is amplified in an animal population, the risk of spillover increases. Therefore, taking steps such as providing vaccinations to domesticated animals and isolating bats infected with a given disease can help limit the spread of contagions that may eventually enter the human population if left unchecked. The next suggestion to improve pandemic prevention is to increase surveillance for novel diseases. In the case of COVID-19, disease surveillance was insufficient to detect the novel coronavirus early enough, and detection came only when sustained community spread was already underway. Methods for improving surveillance for novel contagions could include making health services more accessible, because this may increase the likelihood of community members to seek help when they begin to feel unwell. Another way to go about this is to divert revenue towards bioresearch and sample testing labs and facilities, because this will both improve our ability to identify an unknown illness and our ability to react to it. Finally, pandemic prevention can be improved by assessing and revising how novel diseases are responded to. In the case of COVID-19, authorities first responded to the detection of a new coronavirus by burying reports of it. This was probably done to prevent panic, but it goes without saying that this did more harm than good. A robust and comprehensive response to a disease outbreak early on can significantly reduce the scale of spread or even completely shut down transmission. At the very least, this will buy more time, and it is likely that this will have a large impact on the final outcome of the outbreak. At best, a pandemic can be completely avoided through this step alone. Another step to improve early response is to encourage studying the novel contagion. By studying a novel contagion, we stand to learn a plethora of invaluable information, including how it is transmitted, where it may have come from, how contagious it is, how dangerous it is, and possibly information that will help generate a vaccine. Pandemic prevention is not a replacement for pandemic preparedness, but it is a distinct topic that must be emphasized more heavily. Current conditions in various parts of the world put people in close proximity to potentially disease-carrying animals, and prevention methods are currently inadequate, which is only amplifying the need for pandemic preparedness. I bring this presentation to the World Health Organization with the hopes that by advocating for awareness of this topic, more can be done to bolster strategies pertaining to it. Thank you for listening, and please stay healthy.